So, just perhaps taking the energy theme a little bit further, I had a very, very interesting visit a few weeks ago to Tanzania, which is a stable country. It hasn't suffered war and conflict through its independence at all, but it's a poor country, hasn't a lot of traction on a lot of things either. And I went to see some joined up poverty environment work that UNDP had got involved with the government and with communities and NGOs in what are called the Eastern Arc Mountains. People who know Tanzania, you've got the sort of like a range that's almost parallel to the coast called the Uzumbaras, where the old German summer capital of Lushoto is, and then you have the Ulugurus, which are closer to Dar es Salaam, sort of with the town of Morogoro at their foot. Now, what you see, and I had the privilege of going in four-wheel drives over almost impassable roads to the sort of far end of the valleys up these hillsides, is that the forest has been pushed back to the narrowest little fringe along the top. This, of course, affects water supply, biodiversity, many things. So why is it being pushed back? Well, this is not a new phenomenon. You have a growing population, you have subsistence, agriculture, more people, you clear more forest for your land, and you're growing your maize or whatever. You're also clearing it for your fuel. You drive up these valleys and the hillsides are like that, and the corners sort of at an angle like that. It's absolutely extraordinary. But I didn't see any terracing. You know, this is not like the rice terracing at Banawe or Bontoc of the Philippines, where you have centuries of elaborate human endeavour which has conserved the soil and grown rice for generations. This is just the topsoil is sort of pouring down it, so you've got reduced fertility for the land and the forest pushed up to the fringe. And in some places, the forest completely gone from the top of the ranges. So how to tackle this? Where do you start? And you start with an integrated vision for saving the forest and enabling people to have a livelihood, which doesn't involve destroying the forest. So you look at what the alternatives are, and part of the system we helped set up was a nature reserve system. So you put proper protective kind of envelope around this, setting up with wardens. Then look at the possibilities for ecotourism, the campsites, the guides for visitors who want to get off the beaten track, the sort of thing Kiwis like to do. But then you also have to work on more productive agriculture. So the land that has been being used not very productively, you need to put some input into that. Alternatives like beekeeping, because honey will sell well down in the market. Fish ponds, and we've been talking about that with Cawthron people last night. Fish ponds, because normally a valley will have a little creek running through it, so you've got the water and you can cultivate fish, which is good for protein and maybe, again, selling in the market. And then also very important as part of the project, dealing with this issue of energy, because the traditional cooking in these villages is what they call the three-stone fire. So you have 3 stones and you have 1 pot on it. Not very efficient use of wood and energy. And so there is a lot of training going on to train people, to train others, to build these clay cook stoves, which the women like because they don't smoke as much as a 3-stone fire, so you don't get red eyes. An old woman with red eyes can be quite persecuted in a village in some countries, including Tanzania, because they're then seen as witches, and if a child dies, they go after the old lady with the red eyes, whose eyes are red, of course, from being over the smoke all these years. So the ladies like the clean cook stove, and the way it's built, of course, you can get more than 1 pot on 3 stones. You might get 2 or 3 pots on your cook stove, so it becomes just a much more efficient thing. So they're basic things, but important. But then you see this and these possibilities, and you look at the next step. And the next step is, well, you can be more efficient and get more produce, whether it's fish from the pond or more maize or tomatoes or honey, but then you have to get it to market. And my memory of going up these nearly inaccessible back roads in a 4-wheel drive was of these women walking with piles of produce on their heads. And you'd say to the local people you were with, well, how far are they walking to the market? I said, well, maybe 15 kilometres and home at night. So, the complete absence of rural infrastructure, and these tracks are so bad you can't get a bus up them. Really the next stage of economic development has to be some basic infrastructure. But whose job is that? Well, it's the job of local government, which often has very little capacity, so you have to build the capacity. And then, of course, mobilising the resources to do it. And, supporting developing countries to actually get money into the state treasury and allocate it to what the priorities are is quite a big development challenge in itself. So, all work in progress, as it were. Just on energy issues, the bigger picture, there is a UN Secretary-General initiative called Sustainable Energy for All, and it set targets for universal access to energy by 2030. Now, it is only 2013, so you can see that a lot of people are going to be without much energy for quite a long time, but probably it's not realistic to do it any faster. It also talks about doubling the rate of energy efficiency and the supply of renewables into grids. So these are set as global targets, not only for developing countries. And the idea is to build coalitions to do the things large and small, which would make it possible to get universal energy to everyone. And there's, for a country, the issue is to have a strategy and then to have a way of implementing it. Now, the big electricity initiative might work for the big cities, but for the sort of villages that DOTS project is concentrating on, as I said, the grid ain't going to go out there. And in any case, even in our own country, if we were starting with the technologies available now, we probably wouldn't run out of grid, which took power from the southern lakes of the South Island to Auckland. We would probably have much more distributed, localised generation and supply. And as I go to various African countries which are struggling with this issue of energy supply and want sort of a nationwide system, I say, well, learn from a country like mine, where if you go back many years, in the back farms and valleys, often people had their little micro-hydro, and then the march of the electricity department put them all out of business. I remember great family friends of my parents in the Waitotara Valley up from Whanganui had one of these. Put out of business. You weren't allowed to compete with the electricity grid. Well, you see, by the late 1990s and 2000s, the people, you corporatise your energy companies so that they run more efficiently and so on. And so the issue becomes, well, is really the most efficient way of getting power to everybody to run a grid and lines out, or should we go back to encouraging more decentralised supply? So I say, learn from our experience. You may not even be wanting to think of a nationwide grid. You may be wanting to think of distributed and localised solutions. So that's quite an interesting debate. Anyway, Dot, I'll probably consume my 15 minutes. Initially, I said to you, I don't know whether I can speak for that long, but of course you start to. I could speak for another 2 hours on these things, which I won't. But I'll perhaps just come back to the theme of the issue of the fragile states, because we are consumed with this international debate in development circles at the UN on what will the next global development agenda look like. And it is likely to say no one should be left behind. By 2030, say, extreme poverty should be eradicated. But the point is, you do have to eradicate it in the Central African Republic. You have to eradicate it in Somalia, Afghanistan, Mali, countries which have all these issues. And that's going to be a big ask. The World Bank president put out a new vision earlier this year, and he said the vision of the bank is to see extreme poverty eradicated by 2030, -3%. Well, guess who he had in mind? But, the philosophy has to be leave no one behind. So we have to keep at it and keep at the basic work of trying to tackle those sorts of issues I spoke about last night, of basic social cohesion and better governance and adapting to extreme environments and dealing with the drivers of conflict and fragility. And it isn't quick work. Thank you.